Coming up on Theater Talk.
If somebody blows you away in an audition
Yes.
because of their talent, because of their soul, and sharing that in a little room, they get cast.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm producer Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, what do you have for us this week?
Well, Susan, some of the most powerful people in the business are people who work behind the scenes, and we have three of those incredibly influential people. I like to call them the gatekeepers of Broadway, and if you're a young actor out there, you're not going to have a chance unless you get past the casting director. So who am I anyway? Am I my resume? We are joined by three of the most successful casting directors on Broadway here to tell us what they do and maybe to give you some hints of how you can break into the business. Tara Rubin has cast such shows as Mamma Mia, Jersey Boys, The Heiress, and The Producers. Welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you.
James Calleri has cast Venus in Fur. He worked on Chicago, and he did a wonderful revival a few years ago of A Raisin in the Sun with Sean Combs. Now, was that your idea, to put Sean Combs in play?
It was producer David Binder and I. It was our idea, yeah. We needed someone that was going to make that show go.
I.e. sell the tickets.
And we reached out to him, and he actually came in a couple times.
Ah, good.
Auditioned, yeah.
And we're also joined by Bernie Telsey, who is the casting director for Wicked, Rent, and Annie. But I would say, Bernie, your biggest discovery really was me for Smash on NBC, correct?
Yes, yes. Now that I heard you sing a little bit, I'm thinking maybe you should
Tara,
sing on
I want to play Sky and Mamma Mia. That's what I'm gunning for.
You all don't know what you're doing.
I mean, you sounded really good there for a second.
Right, there you are. All right, Tara. Does one set out to be a casting director, or do you set out to be maybe an actor or a director, and then as you get in this business, you discover there are other things to do?
Well, in my generation, I didn't even know that there were casting directors. So I went to Boston University to their theater program for 2 years. I was an acting major. And as I went through that training, I began to think I'm probably not all that talented. And I wasn't quite certain if I wanted to specialize my education that much. So I transferred to the literature school, and I took my degree in English literature. And then when I got to New York, I did a lot of different things. I tried to be an actress. I proofread advertising copy for Arista Records. I produced radio commercials for Arista Records, but I kept getting drawn back to the theater in one way or another, either producing something for my friends. And then I went to work, we were talking earlier about, I went to work for Lester Osterman.
Who was a great old producer from another era.
That's right, and I worked in his office, and we worked on a production of a great play called Execution of Justice by Emily Mann. And so that, the casting directors were two guys named Jeffrey Johnson and Vinnie Liff, and I went to work for them, and I stayed there for 15 years.
Wow.
But I think if I had known that you could be a casting director, I would probably never have pursued anything else because I loved it so much when I got there. But I think that that our profession is becoming a more established part of the theater community, and people are understanding that it's a...
And it's a great combination because you're working with actors, you're working with producers, writers, directors. You get the best of all the worlds.
You have to write every day. You have to know music.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's a.
You better have that sort of full theater theatrical training.
And it's
That's
like
right.
being a detective all the time because you're always trying to sort of figure out who's that person that nobody on the team knows, or who do you want to bring in for them to.
It's not who done it; it's who can do it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Now, how did you get into it, James?
I studied acting and directing. I got my MFA in both, and then I moved here to the city and actually started as an assistant at the Gersh Agency, a talent agency here. And I worked with a very brilliant but insane agent named Bob Duva.
Oh, sure.
And,
Duva's Divas. He represented all the famous ladies.
And we represented all of them. And so I learned very quickly and then realized I did not want to be an agent.
Why?
It was a lot of negotiating. It was a lot of contracts. It wasn't creative enough for me. I felt like the actors, which you spend a lot of time with, mostly were needing you when they weren't working, and they were usually not happy when they weren't working. Right. So I just found it wasn't a big enough creative outlet for me. So I sort of jumped to the other side, and I went to work with Dan Swee, who was at Lincoln Center, And then he was very instrumental in helping me get this job. I was at Playwrights Horizons for 10 years. So I was casting director there and then left there to open up my own place.
And Bernie, were you an actor too?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost just like Tara's. I went to NYU for acting and theater management because I always knew I wanted to start a theater company. That was sort of what I knew I wanted to do. But
Which, by the way, you do run one, we
Yes,
should say,
yes,
here, an
yeah,
off-Broadway
yeah,
theater company,
MCC.
MCC. Yeah.
In your spare time.
in my spare time. But then literally our theater program, the theater management program, was taught by all these, you know, working professionals like Barbara Houtman and Manny Azenberg. And when you were graduating, you know, they helped you sort of place you in producing type offices. And literally my teacher, Barbara Houtman, said, because at that time I wanted a part-time job because I was going to start a theater tomorrow and that would be, you know, take all my time. And she introduced me to Meg Simon and Fran Cumin. And I was like, I don't really know what a casting office is because it wasn't like today. And I started working for them, doing their accounting and their bookkeeping because I was a bookkeeping minor. And
Fallback career.
yeah, exactly. My mother always said, learn your accounting. And I started working for them and I stayed there, you know, over 6 years before going to open up my own office. But I fell in love with it. I mean, it was the kind of thing that I started going to the theater every night with Meg or Fran because they'd work late and they'd be like, okay, I got to go to a curtain. Who wants to go? And I'd be like, I'll go. And you start, you know, learning about all the actors in town and you start to acquire your own taste. And it just became like, Tara, oh, if I knew about this, I would have done this from beginning, which it was.
Well, it's interesting because I happened to be interviewing Jeff Johnson a couple of weeks ago, and he said he was old enough to remember that the profession used to just mainly be a woman who worked in the producer's office.
Right.
You know, David Merrick, Kermit Bloomgarden. Jeff said really he and Vinnie Liff were the first people to kind of go outside the producer's office and create their own world, if you will, of casting, directing. Why do you think that happened? I mean, why do you think we've lost that whole, everything worked out of Merrick's office and there are so many different power centers now on Broadway?
Well, I think you hit upon it with there are so many different power centers now, and I think I think that the world is bigger. You know, there's so many projects. There's television, and television has, you know, changed and grown exponentially in our lifetime in terms of how many television.
Yeah, cables.
Yes, exactly. That's what I mean.
But also, I suppose maybe we have shows now that run forever and that produce hundreds of productions all over the place. So maybe it's just not viable to work out the old lady working out of the producer's office.
Well, and there's too much. There's too much to it.
It's
And
managing
too much,
a lot.
That's right.
Yeah, there's too much for even those producers to do, and they're even doing multiple shows.
And the producers don't have time to get acquainted with the volume of talent that you've got.
That's right.
And you know, we do this every day, and
Yeah.
we all have staffs, and yet you still wake up every morning thinking there's so many actors you don't know.
That's right.
You know, or how are you going to get to know them? Because every day
There's new people coming in.
Right. So for new people, for kids who are out there thinking of coming in, what advice do you give them when they? I don't guess they don't arrive in the bus anymore. But when they get off the JetBlue flight, I mean, is it true? If you have some talent in this town, someone's going to see you somewhere sooner or later. I would imagine you guys have kids working for you who want to go out to discover the next Kristen Chenoweths and the next Matthew Brodericks.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I think it's talent, but they also have to be motivated to get themselves out there and do good work and be seen, whether it's in a downtown thing or in a
reading.
A reading.
I mean, there's just so many ways to be seen today,
Right.
even if it's not something you would necessarily see them in, between all the readings and the workshops and the off-Broadway and the not-for-profit theater companies. And these young people have to just say yes. And
To
it's
everything.
not, yeah, it's
Right.
not, you know, I mean, and go to every audition. And it doesn't matter if they think they might be right or they might not be right, because, you know, I always say this when we're talking to kids in a school, it's not even about that audition that you're having that day. It's about getting seen by that person who's thinking about you for the 20 other things that you're casting.
That's they could think of you 5 years later.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Because
And
I always
we
said
do it all the time.
I rarely
Yeah.
remember
All
even
the
who we
time.
cast. I remember who's coming in and doing really good work, because those are the people we're going to bring in next
That
week
they'll
and the
come
week
again.
after.
Right.
Eventually, they're going to hit on something. It's just finding the really great people that are going to deliver every time you come into the room.
Now, with the tremendous volume of skillions and skillions of actors competing, if someone's really good, but not beautiful, but if they're just a great actor and they're out there, are they going to make it, or is it really a lottery?
I
Is it
mean,
really a
I
lottery
would
that
say-
they may not?
I think there's all kinds of work for every. I mean, every play and every movie and television series is about a story about a world, and so you have to populate that world through casting, and so you have the attractive people and the people who, people have to look a certain way to play a particular part. So there are jobs for, especially I think nowadays more than ever.
But there's jobs for the lovely, but are there enough jobs for the talented?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think so.
I mean, because if you really are, I mean, that's the thing we all love when you're in an audition. If somebody blows you away in an audition because of their talent, because of their soul, and sharing that in a little room, they get cast. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, it doesn't matter that they don't have the right color hair, or they're not as pretty as I thought coming in.
Right.
We can help with all of that.
Right.
Well, that goes back to the Dustin Hoffman being in The Graduate.
No, absolutely.
That they wanted Robert Redford, but he was better.
Right.
Well, following up on that, let me then ask each one of you if you can give me the circumstances and perhaps the audition where you spotted someone who we all know now, somebody who jumped out at you before they may have jumped out at any one of us.
Well, I would say the obvious for us would be the Tony winner for last year, Nina Arianda, who came in. We saw her in a play at NYU, and we brought her into the office, and it was exactly that conversation we had where she said, James, I just worry, am I going to be playing Russian whores on Law and Order for the rest of my life? Like, that could be my career. And we said, no, I think there's going to be something more than that. And she was good enough to be able to do more than that.
I'm just laughing that she has the ego that she didn't want to just play a Russian whore on Law and Order, which so many performers would be delighted to do. No, go on.
Yeah, and you remember the stories that are dear to your heart more than I gave somebody a break. But when I opened up my own office after leaving Megan Fran, I opened it by just doing commercials, and I was doing nothing but commercials after commercials, and I knew this, commercial actor Jesse L. Martin, who was just, one of those guys we would see every day for a commercial, and he just felt like every time he walked in, his heart was on his sleeve. He just was one of those human beings that you just loved, and he, had a small manager, really wasn't working in the New York community. From the commercials, we put him in this regional theater play up at Connecticut. And then, we started working on Rent. And, everybody knows the Rent stories. And it was, we don't want musical theater people. It was non-traditional, blah, blah, blah. And, I kept wanting to bring in Jesse. And I knew he sang just because he sang in this little commercial that we did.
Who am I anyway?
No, and it was, one of those things we kept trying to bring him in, and he kept canceling. I mean, you go back to the Rent schedules, there's like 7 where, no show. I mean, and then literally, because he didn't want to do a musical.
Oh,
he was a serious actor.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And, I went up to Connecticut to Hartford to see the play and then beg him, to come in for this musical to try to say it's really not a musical, and you would love Michael Greif. And, he came in and, we all know it changed his life. And, it's less about taking responsibility for that as it is just sort of helping introduce someone who didn't know someone.
But it also says a
that's
lot
what it
about
feels
you,
like.
that you were driven to go up and get him, that you knew, that you broke through to him.
Yeah, also that driven came because we couldn't cast the friggin' part. You know what I mean? And it's like all of us could
Necessity's the mother of
only wait
invention.
one more day when the director or Jonathan turn and go, isn't there anybody else? And we're like, yes, he's in Connecticut.
Maybe he won't come in.
And
And then I need to make FaceTime with him to say, trust me, it's not a musical.
Yeah.
Jesse loves to tell that story even more than I do because it really turned his whole sort of,
And for you, Tara, somebody that stood out?
Well, one thing I was just going to say is also wasn't like I think that character was supposed to be like a Bruce Springsteen character, and it was because Bernie said, "I don't care if it's supposed to be a Bruce Springsteen character. I'm bringing Jesse Martin in." And the great thing about that to me is just forever, forever after that part's always played by an African American guy, and that became the character.
Now, one for you though, Tara. You must have somebody that.
Well, I mean, I sort of feel the same way about it that Bernie does. I don't know if you ever really discover anyone, except that you do. You get to be the one who opens the door for them, and you get to be the. And I just recently had a kind of emotional reunion with Sierra Bogus, who just came back and did a triumphant. Christine Daae at the 25th anniversary of Phantom of the Opera last Saturday, and it was like, Christine of the Opera that night. Hugh Panaro was amazing, but she's just so terrific, and we cast her in a tour of Les Miserables, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago, and then she played Christine in Las Vegas, and then she was the Little Mermaid, and so I feel like I've you know, feel so lucky that I've gotten to be around her and work with her on different projects, and so I guess she comes to mind because seeing her recently was such a treat, and she was so magnificent.
And as you say, open the door.
Yeah.
James,
I long ago worked for a director who said, you can always tell within the first 5 minutes if this person's got it. Do you think that's true?
You know, yes, for that particular part.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you do, when you're starting to work on a role and you have such a sense of what the whole team is looking for.
Or if this person's going to make it. You can always tell within 5 minutes. Here's the question. Is that an inaccuracy in that you can tell within the first 5 minutes if they'll make it?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so
Yeah.
either.
Because, you know, and I guess one of the things that we love the most is when we're completely surprised, and I can't tell you how many times that happens the last 5 minutes. You know, I mean, like one of the things I love coming back into my office is just when I said, oh, they'll never get cast, they're getting cast. And you're proud of changing your mind. It's the most exciting when you could go,
When you can-
oh my God, I didn't even think of that, and now look what happened.
And it's a person that you
Because-
never thought you would use.
Yeah. Or
Same
they
here
were
with
the 20th person you thought of.
Yeah.
Aside from your gatekeeper power, aside from assembling these little hopefuls, these would-be's out there, how much influence do you really exert on the directors and the producers that you're working with? I mean, Tara, if you've got, you know, the ear of Judy Kramer and Mamma Mia, can you really get somebody that job?
Ultimately, that relationship changes with every creative team. There are some creative teams where you have a tremendously close relationship, and
History.
and a history, and so there's sort of a trust and an understanding. I feel like I can I know who Des McAnuff is going to like. You know, I see somebody and I think Des will like this guy. And I'm almost always right about that. There's some directors I'm really in their heads. And then there's some directors that you never quite get as in their head as you want to. And perhaps a different casting director would be more successful at getting in their head. Or maybe that's just not something that happens with that particular director, you know?
But it is really about mutual respect and trust.
Right.
And learning each other's taste and
But it's a matter of taste, though, right? I mean, you're working. If you're effective with the people you're working with, you have a sense of what their taste is.
Yeah, and
what they respond
nowadays
to.
they're looking to you to tell them everything that there is to know about that actor because they know that we're out there seeing them in all of these other plays or all these other projects, movies or film, other than just that 10-minute or 20-minute audition. So they really do. I mean, that's what's also wonderful, and that's what we love most is when those directors or producers are saying, who would you hire? Or
We trust
who do
you,
you
yeah.
think? You
And
know,
some
based on
directors
your-
don't need you to do that.
Right.
Some directors, they're so secure, and they know how they want to tell the story and who the people to tell it should be, and you don't need to persuade them or guide them.
Right.
It's just they're that decisive and that sort of precise in their vision at the table.
Let me ask you, because I think, especially for young people who come here and are going to be auditioning for the first time, over the years I've heard from actor friends of mine horror stories about auditioning. You know, these people are in such a vulnerable state when they go in, and they see all of you powerful people arrayed up there. When you're talking to your staff, do you have an etiquette, a way to tell people how to behave at an audition? Tara, you're nodding now.
Well, I do. I mean, I think we treat everybody with the same. If it's a great Broadway, a person with a tremendous Broadway pedigree, or a newcomer, we try to treat them with the same amount of openness and respect and politeness. And we don't text and use our phones during the auditions. We don't read newspapers or take calls in the back of the room. And we're not typing on computers. We're listening. We're there to audit the audition. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And we keep good records. I mean, we're efficient about making sure that no one ever has to say, who was that guy? Or, oh, I thought we were bringing that guy in, but we got it wrong. Like we make sure, and I feel like that's a respect that we can pay to actors, to be efficient with what they do for us. And we don't talk about the audition room. We don't put things up on Facebook. We don't Twitter about what's happening in the audition place. We keep it a private and protected place so that an artist knows that when he comes in, that whatever happened in that room will stay protected.
So it's not really like the old days where they'd say, thank you very much, you know,
Well,
and
no,
you're out.
there are a lot of things you can control, but then there are directors you cannot control, and there are those thank you very muches, or there's those
the
guys
phones.
eating their lunches while you're trying to bring
And
people
again, it's
in.
not that they're wrong for doing that. That's the nature of the situation.
Yeah.
Nobody has the time, and it's really hard to be in auditions all day long. Not for us, because that's what our profession is, and that's what we do, and we know that, and we try to make it as comfortable as possible for the actor and for our teams that we're working for. And you try to tell the actor, the one thing when you say what is the young actor and how to help them stop from being nervous is to know that no matter what it might look like or feel like in the room, down deep, everybody would love to be hiring you.
Yep.
At the end of the day, if you walked into a room and no one was looking at you, they still would love you to blow them away and to hire you.
To make them
Because
look up from
it's
their
not
attention.
attention to be in the room. You know what I mean? And they have
Not
to
a torture
just know that.
chamber.
Right. So they have to know that nobody wants them to succeed more than everyone in that room, whether they're feeling it or not.
But also with the perceived brutality that sometimes is going on in the casting room, any actor who's going to make it has to go through that
Sure,
a lot of times.
yeah.
And that's the weaning process from the millions who trying to the thousands who can stay in the business that they can.
And it's a very odd situation. It's a very inauthentic, weird situation.
tough,
That
And
has sometimes nothing to do with acting, but you have to come in and still get this job first in order to do that, what you want to do.
And you try to say them, and it has nothing to do with being rejected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just a word that is going to be used, and it's an action that happens every day in this profession. But it just, to us, it's you didn't get picked, he did.
Yeah.
You weren't rejected. You know what I mean? You weren't told you weren't liked. You just didn't get cast.
But of course, in
That's
a
what you want
profession
them
of
to
the
remember.
self-absorbed, who can see it any other way than being rejected? We were talking about, before you came in, we were talking about the open calls where I was saying years ago I did an open call, and it was all middle-aged women for an equity principal audition, which are auditions that you don't even have an interview, you're just coming in for the time. But we were talking about the people women who are in their 40s are still going to open calls.
And men too?
Yes, and men too. And you were making an observation that it was kind of bittersweet.
Well, I just said that on the one hand, there's a little bit of heartbreak sometimes when you see an actor come into an open call over and over again, and you've never called that actor back, or you've never cast that person. But then there's also something sort of heartwarming about it at the same time, which is that that person is a true actor, that he has to do it, that he has to come, that he has to try to do that. And I suppose that's one reason why I love the theater programs that encourage people to casting, or to be a press representative, or to be a stage manager, because I think perhaps sometimes there's a love of the theater that's really, that's what I had. I wanted to be in the theater, and it didn't matter that I wasn't not a talented or successful actor. But some people just have to be an actor, and that's kind of thrilling, especially when you see people doing it and they're not enjoying a huge amount of success in it.
Do those open calls really work, though? I mean, aren't they
my
just
God,
aren't they
yes.
just
I mean,
a
listen.
union thing that you have to go through?
No, maybe
They are,
but then you do things like, Rent ran 15 years. There wasn't an open call that we did in even Ohio, and we cast someone in one of the 5 companies of Rent.
Particularly if it's a long-running show.
Right.
It's very useful because there's always a new glut of talent coming in that could be plucked to put in.
And actually, I would say we've rarely done a Broadway show, Broadway musical, where we didn't have at least one person who ended up who was either from an EPA or a chorus call, like a dancer or a singer or somebody.
So it's worth it if you're coming to town to
absolutely.
go to those open calls,
Yeah,
because
particularly young actors
if you
that
guys
are
aren't there,
coming
your
in.
staff will be there taking
Yeah.
a look at it.
I mean, even recently when we did Race, the Mammoth play, our understudy for Kerry Washington came out of the EPA.
What about
and then she got the replacement.
And what
then
about
she got a series regular.
YouTube clips now? What about
love
kids
them.
sending YouTube
Yep.
things around
Yep.
of their college
We
play
watch
or
it.
you do watch
Yep.
it?
Yeah.
We watch them now. We've started in our office, like there's one person whose responsibility is to keep the whole folder, and we're doing a lot of outreach to collect those kind of things.
And it's such a great tool, because oftentimes we're casting you know, a reading or a workshop at Yale Repertory Theater with a new playwright, an emerging playwright and an emerging director, and they're not in New York, and we can't really meet with them. So we can say these 8 actors would be great for the part, and here are clips of them, one being interviewed, one interviewing someone, one singing, one you know, whatever it is, and they're enormously helpful for things like that. It also keeps someone from making a trip if it like we used to always have to just fly someone in and give it a whirl, and now you can send a tape and say, I think you should come, or maybe you don't need to.
Well, Tara and James, I'm going to be sending you my scenes from Smash. Bernie's already familiar with my work.
Good.
He's offer only now, you know. He has an audition.
That's right, exactly.
We created
All right, it's an
show.
It's an interesting profession, a very enlightening discussion today. Thank you very much for giving us a look into the world of casting on Broadway. Tara Rubin, Bernie Telsey, James Calleri, thank you very much for being our guests tonight.
Thank you.
Theater
Thank
Talk.
you. Nice to meet
Thank you very much.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.